Diana L. Forresta, the only daughter of Marquis Forresta, always considered herself fortunate. Her father loved her so much that he missed the opportune time to marry her off. Consequently, she ended up marrying Duke Calypso de Ernest, a man with no particular merit other than his handsome appearance. Yet Diana was happy. Their love, while not passionate, was sweet and tender. Then, her first daughter, Catherine, was born. It was the happiest day of her life. Catherine became her whole world. Everything changed when Catherine lost her sight due to a poisonous, blinding herb. She cried incessantly, calling for her mother, saying she could no longer see the beautiful flowers or the lovely birds. Diana couldn't believe there was no antidote. Alice, the family doctor, with a heavy heart, mentioned a magic that could transfer someone else's sight. Hearing this, Diana froze. But she had her husband prepare the carriage to the temple. Calypso understood immediately. His wife intended to do the unthinkable. He tried to stop her, but Diana loved Catherine more than her own life. Initially, the adjustment wasn't easy, but she believed she could manage. Alice, her childhood friend and family doctor, took meticulous care of her, helping her through this difficult time. Life finally began to settle down, but Diana overheard the conversation. Alice and her husband's voices drifted from his study, exchanging words of love. She couldn't ignore it. Hearing the unfamiliar voice, Calypso and his mistress abruptly looked up. Diana called out in a trembling voice, begging her husband to tell her it was all a lie. She stubbornly clung to the hope that it was all in her imagination, refusing to face reality. The Duke remained silent. Then she collapsed, finally understanding this chaotic mess. Calypso and Alice exchanged a look and sneered. She froze when her childhood friend scoffed, "Were you really that stupid?" Even with so many hints, she remained utterly oblivious, a complete fool. She couldn't utter a word. She began to plead with the husband she loved deeply. Calypso, having had enough, summoned the knights and ordered them to lock the Duchess in the storage room immediately. Diana couldn't believe this was actually happening. The knights locked her, the former Duchess, in a dusty storage room, bid her farewell, and left her completely alone. She didn't know how many days had passed since then, but someone consistently delivered moldy bread to her. She guessed that person was probably Catherine. She must be crying in fear now. And Diana herself had been constantly in tears. One day, someone came. She froze when she heard her daughter's mocking voice, asking if she had died inside. The girl stood at the doorway, smiling. Catherine told her mother that the old witch was still alive. In truth, Alice had hoped she had starved to death. Rage consumed her, and she lunged at her former best friend, ready to tear her face apart. Alice dodged, and Diana fell to the ground. She called her a fool. Diana's eyes widened in horror when she realized that Catherine was actually her husband's mistress's daughter. She had given her sight to someone pretending to be blind. Diana couldn't believe it. If Catherine wasn't her daughter, then her real daughter must be somewhere else. Just then, a sly smile spread across Alice's face. A knight entered the storage room, a sack slung over his shoulder. She heard something heavy being thrown down beside her. She froze. Alice mentioned a servant who dared to disobey the new mistress's orders. It was the girl who had been bringing Diana food. Her trembling hands reached for the sack. Alice said the girl was nothing but a common servant her whole life, but blood couldn't be denied. As Diana began to trace the cold face of her biological daughter, despair completely consumed her. She could no longer hold back her tears and let out a blood-curdling scream. Alice urged her former friend to show one last act of mercy to her real daughter. Then, she ordered the servants to pour the poisonous powder into the storage room. Clutching her child tightly, she begged for her forgiveness. She knew she had failed to protect her and didn't deserve it. Her daughter, the servant, had fought until the very end for a mother who would only fail her. After inhaling the poisonous powder, Diana collapsed. If there was an afterlife, she desperately hoped her daughter would be reborn and start new. That way, she would never mistake her child again. When she woke up again, she found herself in her room. Diana looked around in confusion at the sudden light, tears stained still on her cheeks. She clutched the blanket, her hands trembling uncontrollably. A maid rushed in and abruptly pulled open the blackout curtains. Diana made a small sound, and her personal maid immediately realized her mistress was awake. Everything felt too real to be a dream. After asking the maid for the date, Diana realized she had returned to the day she lost her sight, but now she could see, proving she had traveled back to the past with her vision intact. Now Diana had a chance to save her daughter. It was an impossible opportunity, so the Duchess ordered her maid to take her to the servants' quarters. In fact, Alice had people constantly watching Diana, because even blind, she would never let her title be taken away. The personal maid didn't know what she was planning, but obeyed the order. The Duchess apologized to the assembled servants for interrupting their work. Alice made it clear that her daughter had grown up here as a servant. Her biological daughter's hands were rough and calloused, and she must be around Catherine's age, so Diana decided to dig up as much information as possible here. Diana tried to remind herself that she was blind, but she really wanted to tell her servants that she trusted them. Yet they were giggling and whispering that Lady Alice was right. It was hilarious to watch the blind Duchess. Diana had never seen these girls before, but suddenly remembered that she had replaced all the servants before she went blind. Since the Duchess wasn't anything special, the maids didn't feel the need to try so hard. Earlier, Calypso had told Diana that he had sent all the staff elsewhere because they were urgently needed. Alice comforted Diana and recommended trustworthy servants. Diana, feeling grateful, hugged her friend tightly. She thought it was all for her own good, but everything had been meticulously planned. The blonde woman had dismissed all the maids. Her personal maid didn't think anything unusual had happened, so she didn't bother reporting it to Lady Alice. Walking up the stairs, Diana saw her daughter. Catherine stared at her blankly. Alice's daughter stealthily approached Diana and waved a hand in front of her face, confirming her blindness. Then she smirked, put a finger to her lips, and gestured for the maid to be quiet. Catherine stepped on Diana's skirt, confident that no one would see what she was doing. Diana started to lose her balance and fell, hitting the stairs hard. The pain was excruciating, but Catherine just let out a giggle. The personal maid rushed to Diana's side, thinking she had simply tripped, and reminded her to be careful. Diana loved Catherine with all her heart, more than anyone. But all she got in return was her husband's betrayal. She had trusted him, treating his mistress as her best friend, and a fake daughter. She had to face reality soon. There was no telling when these people might try to kill her again. But in this chaos, Diana wasn't sure she could find her real daughter and save her. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Diana pulled herself together and said, "Come in." Calypso and Alice walked in together without hesitation. The man, clearly annoyed, asked Diana what had happened and if she was all right. Alice secretly laughed at his tone. Diana replied that she was fine, just that she couldn't see anything. A sly smile spread across the redhead's face. She reached out to kiss her man, while Calypso assured Diana that everything was fine. The Duke added that if she needed anything, she could ask at any time. The deceitful couple kissed right in front of Diana. Unable to bear it any longer, Diana told the Duke she was a little tired and wanted to be alone. The man smirked, telling Diana to rest well. Overwhelmed by emotions, Diana rushed to the balcony for some fresh air. She would never forgive these people. Opening the wardrobe and taking out a piece of paper, Diana sat down at the desk and began to write a letter. Those bullies could only watch as she took her revenge. Born into the wealthy Marquis Forresta family, Diana L. Forresta dedicated her life to caring for others. She regularly visited children in orphanages and always organized charity events. Crucially, Diana always emphasized that she was just an ordinary girl without fame or fortune, which was why everyone adored her. Many saw her as an angel sent from heaven. Her reputation grew, even reaching the magic tower. A mage told Master Rory that there was a letter for him. It turned out that Marquis Forresta was looking for a tutor for his daughter. Rory was stunned by the news, actually putting down his book to listen. The Marquis wanted his daughter to learn magic, so he asked if a mid-level mage should be sent. Rory took the letter and overruled his subordinate's suggestion. He intended to meet her personally. Diana sat at her desk, wondering her father would send. Her letters were being monitored, so she had to write something normal that wouldn't arouse suspicion. The magic and alchemy she learned as a child really came in handy. Because of her marriage, she had to give up her skills, but looking back now, Diana realized. She needed to thoroughly investigate everything from the beginning. Diana summoned her maid. The Duchess gave firm orders for her to immediately inform Alice and Catherine that she invited them to tea in the garden. The personal maid couldn't believe this was the same person as yesterday. The maid remained silent, so Diana coldly asked, "Do you dare disobey the Duchess's orders?" The maid immediately indicated she would go and relay the message. Soon, tea was served, and Alice, already seated, told her Grace that she'd best get used to the fact that she couldn't see. The Duke's mistress was from the Viscount Blair family, someone who had once been Diana's closest childhood friend. When Diana discovered Alice had come here as the family doctor, she almost jumped for joy. Now she realized how much of a fool she had been acting like before. Diana suddenly heard Catherine's voice. Diana couldn't understand how the Duke's mistress dared to turn her daughter into a servant, while her own bastard child posed as the young miss. But when Diana saw Catherine, she immediately feigned delight and deliberately yanked the tablecloth. As she stood, the teapot overturned, spilling scalding tea all over the Duke's mistress's feet. Both Catherine and the maid froze in shock. Alice's daughter shrieked at Diana, saying she'd burn the doctor, while Diana put on a pitiful act and apologized insincerely. She sighed dramatically, claiming she was still getting used to being blind. Alice stood and ordered the Duchess to go back inside immediately, saying she needed to attend to her burns, leaving Diana and Catherine alone. Diana turned to the girl with a request. She wanted her help getting dressed every morning and also wanted the girl to read to her in her sweet, canary-like voice. She reminded Catherine that she had even given her own eyes to her. Alice's daughter gritted her teeth. This woman was truly infuriating, and she absolutely did not want to help. But she couldn't refuse. Diana smiled triumphantly and said to her fake daughter, "It seems we'll be seeing each other again tomorrow morning." Alice clung to Calypso, crying, "My leg hurts so much." He decided to check it himself. He reached out to touch his mistress's leg, thinking Diana would never appear in his office, but he was wrong. Calypso turned to his wife in shock, asking what she was doing there. Diana never came to his office. She always thought she would distract him. He wondered if she had finally discovered something, but Diana just sat beside her husband and sadly whispered that the servants were ignoring her and whispering behind her back. The Duchess had had enough, so she decided to dismiss them all. Calypso signaled his mistress to leave the room immediately so he could deal with the matter. Alice stood up, silently cursing Diana as a bitch in her mind. Diana asked her husband to recall the previous servants, but he said they were needed elsewhere. She declared that if that were the case, she would write to the Marquis. The woman looked exactly like her father, but Calypso just couldn't bring himself to love her. The Marquis of Parachute's power was comparable to the Emperor's, which was precisely why Calypso had no choice but to marry his daughter. Fortunately for them, the unsuspecting Diana turned out to be a gold mine. As soon as he married into her family, enormous donations began pouring in. It was a perfect opportunity for Calypso to start a new business and avoid bankruptcy. But the Marquis was always writing to inquire about the situation. He wanted their power, not an arrogant old man constantly breathing down his neck. So, the Marquis absolutely could not know about this matter. He asked Diana if summoning Shane and Milan would be sufficient. Diana threw herself into her husband's arms, thanking him for finally granting her request. Now, the real show was about to begin. Night fell, but Diana wasn't asleep. Putting down her book, the young woman decided to rest. Dinner time had long passed, but no one had come to call her. Now, Diana sat in her room, hungry. It seemed no one cared about her at all, but it didn't matter. The Duchess was going to kick everyone out tomorrow anyway. Diana had always gone hungry in her previous life. Diana walked out onto the terrace, wanting to breathe in some fresh air and admire the night view. A sudden gust of wind blew, and a man's hand appeared out of thin air. Reborn suddenly appeared before Diana, saying he never thought his first student would be such an outstanding individual. The man was pleased to see her. Diana stammered, asking who he was. It turned out the man was the next candidate for the Magic Tower's master, hired by the Marquis for his daughter. So, Reborn was now going to be Diana's teacher. Her father's actions were definitely overstepping, but it was done, and there was no turning back. The young man handed her the scarf that had slipped from her face, asking why she wore it. Diana said she had lost her sight in an accident. Reborn replied that it was strange, and Diana realized she couldn't easily fool the mage, but he simply dismissed it as a joke. Diana's cheeks flushed crimson, but she was relieved the strange teacher hadn't exposed her. Reborn tied the bandage properly for her. He gave his name and told her she could call him whatever she pleased. Lessons would be once a week at noon, adding that he would personally come to the palace whenever he had time. There was no need to send anyone to fetch him, he told Diana, ensuring everything was arranged as she wished. Diana found his casual attitude amusing, but assured her teacher she would look forward to it. Reborn smiled warmly at the Duchess's words. Diana suddenly felt a sharp headache, and the young man panicked at the sight. An image of a weeping man flashed through her mind. He was trying to do something, failing repeatedly, then starting over each time. A voice echoed in her mind, but Diana couldn't recognize it. Diana told her two returning maids the whole truth. Despite the unbelievable story, Milan couldn't help but burst into tears. Milan asked her mistress what she planned to do next. Diana was determined to take revenge on those monsters. Milan knelt before her mistress, swearing to serve her for the rest of her life. Shane knelt beside her, pledging obedience to any command. Diana smiled warmly, grateful for the girl's loyalty. Now, the young Duchess was ready to have her loyal maids do something for her the next day. Diana welcomed all the newly arrived maids, congratulating them on starting their work at the Duke's mansion. Each maid received a small velvet pouch. The Duchess had them open it to see their monthly salary. Upon seeing the jewels inside, the maids couldn't believe it was their actual pay. Diana promised she would cherish every one of them, but there was one condition. Diana dumped all the jewels on the floor and crushed them with her heel, demonstrating that as long as they minded their own business, she would respect every maid. The Duchess told them not to betray her and to remember they had only one true master, Diana of Ernest. The maids answered in unison, "We understand." Diana was taking a walk in the manor gardens when she froze as someone called out to her. The previous maids were kneeling before her, trembling and begging their mistress, asking why she had suddenly abandoned them. One girl began to plead for reinstatement, but right in front of Diana, a blue-haired maid drew her sword and ordered them to back off. Last night, Diana had asked Shane to find a female knight. The maids questioned if they couldn't just go directly to their master, but Diana explained that she needed an unregistered knight who could disguise herself as a maid. She would be entrusted with a crucial task. Diana told Belinda that these former maids clearly didn't realize what they had done wrong. Those wretches had betrayed the Duchess for a few coins, switching over to Alice's side, and now they had the nerve to come back and beg for forgiveness. Diana wouldn't let any of them set foot in here again. Alice peeked from around the corner, muttering that those idiots had dug their own graves and now looked pathetic. But the healer felt something was amiss. In the end, Diana only kept the maid Julia. She might know all of Alice's plans, so Diana ordered her to keep a close watch on her. Diana asked Milan how the task she had entrusted to her was progressing. The maid replied that so far, no clues had been found regarding her daughter. There wasn't a single 15-year-old girl with rough, calloused hands and a skinny build in the Duke's mansion, so the search had expanded to the estate. Diana nodded, telling her to continue searching. Diana didn't know where Alice had hidden her. The Duchess turned to Shane, ordering her to bring Catherine to her room immediately. The maid nodded. Catherine erupted in protest when she heard the fake mother's request. Shane said that her grace wanted some quiet reading time. Catherine started to argue, but the maid apologized and left without another word. If Diana didn't see anything, she had to remain absolutely silent. Once Mother becomes the Duchess, that woman will be nothing. In a fit of rage, Catherine smashed a teacup and then stormed over to the bookshelf, kicking it hard. A pale-faced girl trembled as she emerged from the secret door, asking if the lady had called for her. Catherine grabbed Assel by the hair and dragged her to the table. Then she threw her down next to the broken porcelain. Alice's daughter yelled at everyone, "Clean this up right now. This place better be spotless when I get back. Otherwise, Isel would be in trouble." Catherine entered her fake mother's room, letting her know she had arrived. Diana pointed out that she was late. The girl quickly apologized, saying she had simply forgotten and thought she could get away with it. Catherine smiled at her, as usual, and asked if her mother would forgive her. Diana gave her a cold look and asked if she didn't know that punctuality was one of the essential qualities of a proper lady. Catherine mumbled uncomfortably that she knew. Diana crossed her arms and warned her not to let it happen again. again. Diana pointed to the mountain of books that Catherine was supposed to read to her today. Catherine wanted to argue, but the Duchess reminded her that she couldn't see and needed help. Since she enjoyed Catherine's voice so much, Catherine was the one she wanted to hear read. Catherine agreed, but not long after, she put the book aside. She crossed her arms and declared that her throat was killing her from reading nonstop. Diana had always known Catherine was impatient, but she never said anything. After all, she had once loved her. Everything was progressing much faster than Diana had anticipated. She reminded Catherine that she was already 15 years old, and that perhaps she had spoiled her daughter too much. Diana decided to cancel tomorrow's meeting with Sawyer's son. Catherine jumped up from her chair and blurted out, "What do you mean?" But the Duchess calmly replied, "I can't introduce a lady who can't even keep her promises to her own family to my son." Catherine had been waiting for this day for far too long. At every gathering, she had her eyes on him. All she dreamed of was being alone with the Duke's son. Her parents had no connection to the Abray Duchy. Only Diana could help her. The Duchess told Catherine that as long as she was obedient, she would reschedule the meeting with the Duke's son. Upon hearing this, the girl immediately perked up. She promised her mother that she would never be late again and would read to her every day. Blinded by greed, the child was far too easy to manipulate. Catherine picked up her book, determined to continue reading from today onwards. Diana was about to begin her magic lessons. The teacher was new. Valinda informed the Duchess that she would be waiting at the garden entrance. Diana hoped the location was all right. Diana glanced at her watch, realizing the lesson was about to start. She thought the teacher would probably appear out of nowhere again, like last time, but this time she wasn't afraid. Rory appeared before his mistress right on time. He calmly bowed and greeted her. Diana returned the greeting, and the red-haired man said he had been eagerly anticipating this day. It was his honor to train the Duchess. Diana breathed a sigh of relief and smiled faintly at him. Rory asked her Grace to choose a skill from attack magic, defense, or suppression. Diana paused, tried to recall the last time she had used magic. She shyly admitted that she wanted to start with the basics, so Rory had her roll up her sleeves. And take it slow. He first suggested learning how to release energy. Rory demonstrated his flickering flames in his palm. Each type of energy had its unique properties: fire, water, ice, wind, lightning, and earth. They could use magic that corresponded to these properties. Rory was a fire attribute, while Diana controlled ice. He suggested she give it a try, so Diana made up her mind, extended her hand, and attempted to release her power. But didn't go as planned, and her face flushed instantly. She hadn't expected it to be this bad. Rory took Diana's hand. He told her to relax her palm and focus on channeling her magic outwards. Diana took a deep breath. The young woman focused, gathering all her strength to her fingertips, and tried again. Just then, Calypso walked over. This time, Diana succeeded. Overjoyed, she immediately interlocked her fingers with her teacher's and beamed at him. It was at this moment that the Duke stumbled upon the scene. Seeing his wife with another man, Calypso froze. He stormed towards his wife, his voice tight, as he demanded to know who the man beside her was. Diana explained that this was Rory, her magic teacher. Unable to read anymore after losing her sight, she had decided to try learning magic. Calypso glared at his wife's teacher. It was quite laughable, as the man had no right to be jealous of Diana over another man. Diana introduced her husband, Calypso, to Rory. The mage smiled at the Duke, saying he felt like he was being burned by his gaze. Just then, Catherine walked over. Her voice was hoarse from reading every day. She asked what her parents were doing there. Diana told Catherine to greet him as well, and Diana introduced her magic teacher. A sly smile spread across Rory's face as he remarked that Catherine didn't resemble her mother at all, which he found odd. Calypso sharply rebuked him, declaring the comment incredibly rude. Diana explained that their daughter simply took after her husband. Rory was completely baffled as to how his words could have so offended the Duke. But Calypso insisted that no one, not even a teacher, should make such a remark. A firebird spontaneously appeared before the Duke. Despite his noble bearing and status, Calypso knew these attributes held no significance. Within the magic tower, a power existed that transcended human comprehension. The tower was a place solely for those gifted with magic, a society where status was irrelevant. Mr. Rory was an authority figure within the magic tower. Calypso, grasping the implication, turned abruptly and said curtly, "I have much to attend to today. I must be going." Diana, convinced that magic was a terrifying thing, asked Catherine to wait a moment before leaving. Then, Diana told her teacher that she had a small but important request. She hoped he would also teach her daughter magic. Magical ability was inherited, not randomly distributed like in the human world. If the parents possessed magic, this ability would be passed down to their children. Catherine's anxiety spiked. She feared the Duchess would discover she wasn't her biological daughter. The girl expressed her aversion to magic, but Diana persisted, arguing that it was too useful to ignore. Diana explained it was all for her future. Catherine was Duke Ernest's only daughter. If she inherited his title, magic would be invaluable. It would also give her the opportunity to meet Prince Sawyer. Catherine's eyes lit up, and she immediately agreed to the training. Rory consented as well, and Diana thanked him, saying they would begin next week. Rory admitted he preferred to conduct the lessons privately. He apologized, but the words were already out. He bid Diana farewell and vanished in thin air. Diana, her cheeks flushed, hadn't expected such a parting remark from her teacher. Alice froze when she saw Diana standing there. With so many eyes on them, Alice couldn't ignore her. She asked where her Grace had been. Diana explained she'd been in the garden, where she had invited the magic tutor. Diana also mentioned that Calypso had become jealous of him. Alice asked what she meant. Diana said her husband's voice had dripped with anger when introducing the tutor. Alice insisted that was impossible. Diana mentioned that the Duke had even started an argument. She wanted to see that expression again, but Alice abruptly declared she had to leave. She couldn't understand what it all meant. Calypso was hers and hers alone, so he would never think of being jealous of Diana, especially not over another man. Diana silently prayed Alice would wait until she stripped her of everything she held dear. Alice excused herself, claiming illness, and went to Catherine's room. She froze when she heard her daughter's hoarse voice. Catherine explained she wasn't sick, just that Diana had made her read boring books for hours, and now she had to do it every day. The girl told her mother that the Duchess had deliberately canceled her meeting with Prince Sawyer and scolded her. First, Diana replaced all the maids, and now she dared to touch Alice's daughter. Catherine speculated that the Duchess had only become more sensitive after losing her sight. But there was something even more important. From now on, Catherine had to study magic with Diana. Alice was stunned by this news. She couldn't believe her daughter had actually agreed to learn magic, but Catherine thought she might as well try. It was clear she possessed no magical ability. Even though Alice was a top-notch physician, you couldn't fool a true mage. Catherine was now at a loss, trapped in a situation with no way out. Alice's gaze fixed on the bookshelf. She had devised a foolproof plan. Isel timidly asked why the two ladies had summoned her so suddenly. 5 years ago, Catherine had stumbled upon her biological mother and father together and learned the truth. She knew this woman was her mother's best friend. Alice abruptly fell to her knees, but Catherine called her a liar and threatened to tell her mother. Just then, a bombshell dropped. She was Alice's daughter. Catherine was speechless, but her father's solemn confirmation hit her like a speeding freight train. The girl felt dizzy. If the news that Catherine wasn't Diana's biological daughter got out, it would spread like wildfire and the entire social scene would go mad. In that case, the Duchess would surely abandon her. Catherine, quick-witted, grasped the situation and asked where Diana's real daughter was now. It turned out the child was being raised alongside orphans. Alice told her daughter that those low-born children. But Catherine herself was supposed to be precious, special, destined to one day become the true Duchess. Alice explained to Hazel what she needed to do. But the child thought of herself as just a commoner without magic, unable to help. She planned to ask a seasoned mage for assistance, so at least the blonde girl would have a chance. Isel was supposed to help her ladyship the Duchess and continue the charade, but Catherine slapped her across the face without warning. The commoner kept saying things she shouldn't, so Alice's daughter decided to remind her of her place. She started yelling at Isel to shut up and stop asking questions. Just as Catherine was about to hit her with a shoe, Alice stopped her. Her daughter screamed that she couldn't stand the brat anymore and locked her behind the sliding bookshelf again. Alice assured her daughter that she would find a tutor for the child tomorrow, so she shouldn't take it to heart. She reminded Catherine that she was the real Duchess. The next day arrived, the weather was fine, and Diana decided to practice magic in the fresh air. She focused, letting her power flow freely. Meanwhile, her supposed daughter was attempting the same maneuvers, but couldn't even conjure a spark. Alice asked the mage about her progress, and he said the girl had potential, but it was buried under layers of mediocrity. Even with low mana, she should be able to produce a faint glow. It seemed the child was hopeless. Alice wished Diana could hear this now. Even if this brat was her flesh and blood, she was a useless waste, all potential and no delivery. But Alice told the mage that they didn't need a magical prodigy. She just wanted the child to learn a basic summoning spell by next week, and the teacher agreed to try. Diana chuckled to herself, wondering how Catherine would bluff her way through this one. The girl was nothing but arrogance and hot air. Diana started to contemplate, as she always did. Would her daughter eventually be like her? She would find her sweet daughter, no matter the cost. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. The maid, Milan, informed Lady Diana that she had brought lunch, and Diana invited her in. The maid quickly set everything up, and Diana thanked her. Diana had no appetite at all. She caught a glimpse of that familiar fiery red hair from the window. Diana sat up abruptly when she realized who was standing on her terrace. Rory smiled and asked her to open the window. He had come to make up for the lost lesson time, as they hadn't had enough time last time and had been constantly interrupted. Diana thanked Rory for his thoughtfulness and invited him to join her for lunch. The maid was about to refuse, as he was there to tutor her. But Diana explained that she simply wanted to share a meal and had many things to ask him. Rory's cheeks flushed, but he nodded. Each dish looked delicious. He picked up his cutlery and proceeded to cut the steak. Diana had expected the mage to be more casual at the table, but Rory's manners were impeccably elegant. Diana felt like she was dining in a palace. She bluntly asked him if he was actually eating, as there wasn't a sound. Rory said he'd been trained from day one. He told her he grew up in an orphanage before finding his parents. Diana realized she probably shouldn't have brought it up. Rory said the orphanage wasn't so bad, thanks to one person. Diana stared sadly at her teacher for a long moment. Despite his words, his expression was unusually somber. Diana wondered if that part of his past had really affected him that much. A few days later, Catherine walked in with a smug grin. She announced her return. Rory bowed to the young miss, then asked with a straight face, "Who is this old woman next to you?" Alice was enraged. "I'm not an old woman." She said she was the Duke's personal healer and a member of the staff here. She'd heard the young miss was undergoing magical training, so she came to have a look. Diana smiled at her best friend and told her she could watch as long as she liked. Rory decided to test the young miss first to assess her level. At that moment, Isel was hiding behind the curtains on the second floor. Not long ago, Alice had suggested they try again. Catherine held out her hand, and Diana's real daughter cast an ice spell. Mother and daughter beamed, confident that everything would go smoothly this time. The lesson was about to begin, so Alice told her daughter she would go with her. Catherine yelled at the commoner, telling her she had to succeed this time. Isel was getting ready to act. If Catherine had mana, she would feel it flowing within her, and the girl claimed she definitely could. Rory suggested she try focusing her mana in her hand. Catherine was sure it would work this time. After all, the commoner would cast the spell for her. She held out her hand, but nothing happened. Alice and Catherine both froze, realizing something was wrong. After a brief silence, the girl screamed. "This is impossible," Diana asked, bewildered. "What were the results?" Rory told the Duchess that the young lady had failed. Alice immediately interjected, explaining that Catherine might just be nervous and could try again, but no matter how many times she tried, the result would be the same. Catherine had absolutely no magic. The Duchess asked in astonishment, "Isn't magic supposed to be more easily manifested in youth and passed down through bloodlines?" It was strange, since Catherine was her daughter. Rory confirmed this, stating that he had never seen anything like it before. Catherine trembled with rage, cursing the commoner in her mind. "How dare you humiliate me?" But there was nothing she could do about it. Diana declared that Catherine would have to study magic on her own, and the young lady cried out, "There must be some mistake. But a lady should know that she cannot excel at everything." Catherine screamed that she hated them all and stormed off. She needn't be so angry. Things would only get worse, and the Duchess would make sure of it. Catherine was furious. Isel had ruined everything. If she wanted any chance with Sir Sawyer, she needed to be in Diana's good graces. Alice's daughter decided she was going to kill the country bumpkin. She flung open the door, but the room was empty. Alice assumed that Catherine had been deeply affected and relayed this to the Duchess, but in reality, only Diana was disappointed. Catherine's complaints were hollow. The Duchess admitted she felt a little guilty. Rory thought Catherine was a complete and utter people-pleaser. Just like that family doctor, Diana said with a chuckle. We're the same age, so my child was able to get close to Alice. Alice said she would check on Catherine. The Duchess smiled at her friend. You've always taken care of us, Catherine and me. The girl told her mother in a panic. The country bumpkin ran away. Alice froze at these words, and the entire room turned icy. It turned out that the idiot's real daughter had kicked open the door during the magic lesson and run off. Alice couldn't believe Acel had been hiding her power all along. Now it was time to find her. As long as Diana could see her daughter again, things would be different. Suddenly, her loyal maids rushed in. Noticing the anxious looks on their faces, Diana asked what had happened. It turned out Julia had just slipped out of the manor. Since Diana hadn't given any orders, this seemed suspicious. Julia was Alice's only remaining ally, so she was likely acting on her orders. It was finally time for tea with Julia. The maid entered the Duchess's room. She asked why she had been summoned. The Duchess smiled and said she just wanted to chat, but first, she offered her some tea. It's chamomile tea, very good for relieving fatigue, the Duchess said. Julia took a small sip without suspicion, but she immediately realized it was not chamomile tea at all. Lightning flashed outside the window. The Duchess asked the maid coldly, "Where's my daughter right now?" Julia coughed, saying she didn't understand what the Duchess was talking about. But Diana knew Julia was also involved, and spitting out the tea now wouldn't help. Just one drop of Veritasium was enough to make someone spill everything. Diana was the only one in the manor who could brew it, as it was an alchemical potion made with magic. The Duchess repeated her question. Then Julia replied that the girl had run away. Diana froze, not expecting to hear that answer. Training new maids was always a pain for Julia, and Lady Alice hadn't shared many details with her lately. But today she had told Julia that Acel had run away. They were talking about the brat Alice had been hiding. Apparently, she had used magic to escape. Alice had ordered her to bring the girl back, at any cost. After receiving payment, Julia had decided to start the search immediately. Diana's real daughter was a maid in Catherine's room, but the girl tormented her every day. Perhaps she simply couldn't take it anymore. Diana decided to ask what she looked like. Acel had golden hair and emerald green eyes, just like the Duchess herself. Diana started screaming at Julia, saying she knew everything and still chose the other side, but the maid just laughed loudly. Julia didn't get to see such tragedies every day. She kept laughing while Diana couldn't hold back her tears. Her tears. Acel ran at full speed until she collapsed from exhaustion. The girl found herself unable to move, sensing someone behind her. This was all too amusing for Julia. This was why she loved Lady Alice so much. The Duchess couldn't take it anymore, so she called for Valinda and ordered her to kill the brat immediately. The girl was stunned by the command. But now Diana began to beg Valinda to get the monster out of her sight, and the girl complied. The maid frantically scrubbed to remove the bloodstains from the floor. This was the protagonist's first kill. In this house full of hypocrites, Diana couldn't allow herself to appear weak, so she held back her tears. There was still a mess to clean up. She asked Milan to take Catherine to the drawing room. The priority was to make sure the young lady was waiting for her. At that moment, Acel poured all her magic into defending herself against the cloaked stranger, but he kept dodging and blocking with his shield. The figure made no further moves. Acel didn't know who he was, but she guessed he was sent by the manor to hunt her down. She started to feel dizzy, realizing she had exhausted all her strength and couldn't fight anymore. Finally, the girl fainted. The caretaker had settled all the children in, ready for the night. Suddenly, someone knocked on the orphanage door. When she opened it, the woman asked the dark-cloaked figure what brought him out in such weather. He explained that he needed to bring this girl here. The caretaker noticed the girl was in very bad shape. She asked the visitor to come in with her, and the stranger did so without hesitation. Diana's daughter had been serving as a maid in Catherine's room. All this time, near the bookshelf, the protagonist detected residual magic. She quickly discovered a secret room behind the bookshelf and pushed it aside. Inside, the protagonist found a small, dusty room. It turned out that Alice had deliberately built this room and locked the protagonist's child inside. Just behind her, Diana found moldy bread the kind her daughter could have brought her. Then, her legs gave way, and she collapsed to the floor, heartbroken. Even when her daughter was injured, she still brought bread. Catherine had grown tired of waiting for the Duchess. As soon as the protagonist stepped into the drawing room, she immediately apologized to Catherine for making her wait. Diana said she was considering finding her a new magic tutor. The Duchess thought Rory had simply messed up. Catherine told her, bewildered, that all the introductory social etiquette lessons had left her no time for magic lessons. But the protagonist believed that it was precisely at this age that magic must be learned, or she would regret it later. The truth was, Diana just wanted this brat to suffer twice as much as her own daughter. Catherine asked to leave, and the protagonist allowed it. The girl told her mother to take care and left the drawing room. The protagonist managed to find her daughter's personal diary among her belongings and secretly took it away. After reading a few pages, she was shocked. Diana couldn't believe that the little girl had known all along that the mistress of the manor was her mother and had lived like this. She knew the Duchess now loved another child. The protagonist thought her daughter was simply disappointed in her and had run away. Diana began to beg for forgiveness. She begged her daughter to wait a little longer until she found her. Alice found the whole situation strange. She checked every room and asked the other maids, but Yulia was nowhere to be found. The maid had vanished without a trace. Now it was finally clear why there had been no news of Yulia for several days. Something unexpected might have happened. Alice heard Diana call her name. The protagonist wondered if something was wrong, as Shane had said the family doctor seemed off. Alice said she was fine and asked where the Duchess was going. Diana conjured some ice, saying she had a magic lesson today. Suddenly, the protagonist's magic went out of control and hit Alice. She fell to the ground, and Diana was frightened, wondering if something had happened. Shane told the Duchess that her magic spark had rebounded and burned her dress. Diana hadn't expected this at all. As expected, she was still a novice at magic, so she asked Alice if she was all right. The Duke's mistress trembled like a leaf, but still said, "I'm fine." Then she stood up and announced she was going upstairs, telling Her Highness to enjoy her lesson. This situation ignited a fire of rage in Alice's heart. The protagonist kept a close eye on where her husband's mistress was going. Then she ordered her trusted maid to immediately send a servant to Calypso's office with tea. At that moment, the Duke was reviewing documents. Alice burst into the office, screaming, "I can't take it anymore." While the lovers were talking, the maid put down the tea and deliberately left the door slightly ajar. Now Diana could hear the entire conversation. Alice was insistent on knowing when Calypso would finally make her his legal wife. The man pleaded for more time, as Diana was still alive. But Alice wasn't planning on waiting for the idiot to grow old and die. Calypso retorted coldly, "We'll wait until the Duke hands over something truly important." Diana wondered what that could be. The Duke was desperate for money, and he had deliberately married Diana to escape his financial predicament. The Duke had promised a hand over the diamond mine once Catherine's social debut was held. Calypso told Alice to simply wait patiently until then. The protagonist knew very well that the day of Catherine's debut would be the day of her own death. Her father's diamond mine was the reason those adulterers had kept her alive this long. For so long, this father had no idea that his real daughter and granddaughter were on the verge of death. Yet he was throwing a party for that fake granddaughter and handing over the diamond mine to her. It was so disgusting that even the protagonist couldn't understand it. Diana had her suspicions, but she hadn't expected things to be this bad. After all, this entire mansion was a nightmare. Class time came and passed, but Diana didn't appear. It turned out she was only a little late. Rui was happy to see Duchess Diana. She immediately apologized for her tardiness in a slightly different tone than usual. Rui, finding it strange, asked if she was all right. Duchess Diana nodded, deciding to rest for a bit, but Rui immediately grabbed her wrist. He didn't understand why Diana was lying to him now and demanded she look him in the eyes. But the Duchess reminded him that she couldn't see anything. However, Rui told her without a doubt that she could see everything. Hearing this, Duchess Diana froze. She quickly brought him to her room, pinned him against the wall, and demanded to know how he found out. Rui smiled, complimenting her on her strength. Duchess Diana ripped off her eye mask and demanded the mage tell her immediately how he knew her secret. She didn't understand why he pretended not to know anything when he already knew everything. Suddenly, Rui told the protagonist that he liked her. The young woman looked at him with suspicion, asking him to repeat what he had just said. Rui added that he also admired her bravery. It turned out he had willingly been deceived simply because he had a crush on Diana. But the protagonist made it clear that she didn't want to play any games. The mage reminded her that he was employed by the Duke, and that alone was enough reason to lend a hand to the sacred Forresta family. Not everyone could earn that title, which was why Rui had faith in the protagonist. Perhaps he could do Diana a small favor. So the protagonist grabbed his sleeve and begged for his help. Afterward, Diana found herself sitting across from her husband, who had just summoned her. Calypso told his wife that an invitation for her had just arrived. The Abbé Dukedam family was one of the most prestigious families in the capital, a hub of high society. They were holding a special tea party, and Diana's invitation had arrived just at the right time. Calypso needed to deal with Catherine's engagement matters, so he had no choice but to accept this invitation. The man confided in his wife that he was very worried. This was his usual act of pretending to care for Diana, while secretly sending Alice to the tea party. He kept trying to push the protagonist into those circles of haughty, noble women. Calypso worried that the gossip-loving nobles might hurt his wife's fragile heart, and that would injure Diana. Diana said that Catherine would be disappointed if she didn't go, as she liked Lord Sawyer. The Duke then suggested sending Alice. The protagonist agreed. It was time to go to the tea party. That idiot, Alice, put on a lovely light green dress. Diana even went so far as to order a dress for her from a top dressmaker, just to show off. Catherine was thrilled to finally be able to see him. Alice smiled and said, "I think His Highness must be really happy." The protagonist stepped forward. It's been a while since the last tea party at the Abbey's. Diana came out only to see her daughter and good friend off. The Duke apologized. "I'm truly sorry. I still can't go." Diana knew that with her eyes in their current state, she couldn't attend the tea party. Calypso had said it would be impossible unless a miracle happened. Suddenly, they heard the sound of someone rushing towards them, and then they saw the high priest running towards Her Grace the Duchess. He grinned like a madman, telling them, "I found Her Grace's lost eyesight. It's been drifting nearby." The protagonist asked him, bewildered, what he meant. Alice stepped forward and declared, facing the Duchess, "Her Grace exchanged her eyesight for a divine gift." But the priest said, "I simply wish to restore Her Grace's eyesight." The man pulled out his priestly badge. Valinda whispered to her mistress, "He's not lying." Now, Alice started to become very nervous. This was unreasonable. The protagonist was certain she had passed her eyesight on to her daughter, so this should have been impossible. The priest smiled and said it was a true miracle. He closed his eyes, feeling the energy in the air, then gathered it to a single point. As soon as Her Grace places her hand on the crystal, her sight will be restored at once, and everything will return to normal. Catherine gasped. It couldn't be true. Alice immediately echoed her sentiment. They didn't know what the outcome would be. But Diana turned to her daughter. "Do you remember what it felt like to live in darkness?" The protagonist was ready to seize any chance, however absurd it might seem, as long as there was a sliver of possibility for success. The power contained within the crystal was undoubtedly divine. Diana turned to Valinda. "Help me." The maid quickly supported the protagonist as she reached out her hand towards the crystal. The crystal emitted a dazzling light, causing everyone present to tightly close their eyes. A pure and holy, dazzling blue light struck the protagonist. As the light faded, Calypso called out to his wife. Now the protagonist could see again. The Duke, Alice, and Catherine were all stunned by the news. The other maids were overjoyed and rushed forward to congratulate their mistress, convinced that the heavens had been moved by her kindness. After them, Calypso and Alice also joined in the congratulations. Diana pulled Catherine into a tight embrace, acting as if seeing her face again filled her with overwhelming emotion. Tears of joy welled up in the protagonist's eyes. Everyone else was deeply moved. Taking advantage of the distraction, the priest slipped away. Around the corner, Rory transformed back to his original appearance and remarked that Diana's idea to fake a miracle was absolutely insane. The protagonist had her reasons for feigning blindness before, but now it was pointless. Diana had figured out their motives. Now she just needed to find that daughter. But while she was blind, it greatly limited her search, so the protagonist decided to stage a fake miracle. The Duchess announced that she wanted to open her eyes and asked Rory for help. The fellow simply spread his arms, saying he was too soft-hearted to refuse when someone looked at him like that. All it took was a word from the Duchess, and Rory would do his utmost. Now, Diana could put her plan into action. Catherine suddenly pushed the protagonist away, asking in a trembling voice, "What if my eyesight is ruined? What if something goes wrong?" Diana fully understood her fear, but there was no reason to panic. The protagonist told Catherine that she had never been sick a day in her life, so there was no way she could have inherited her poor eyesight. The Duchess stared at the sky and said, "It's truly a miracle." Noticing Catherine's strange expression, the protagonist asked if she was feeling unwell. The girl shrugged, saying she probably just caught a cold, which was why her complexion was poor. Diana immediately instructed Alice to stay behind and look after Catherine. They couldn't take her out looking like that. They both needed a day of rest. Having Alice go in the Duchess's place was completely out of the question. So the protagonist decided to attend the tea party herself, especially since her sight had been restored. As soon as Diana left to change, the Duke let out an annoyed grunt. Even after he had arranged everything, Alice still hadn't handled things properly, and now matters had become even more complicated. Catherine came running, begging to go along, insisting she was much better now. As long as she could be with the young Mr. Sawyer, Catherine didn't care about her mother at all. She was determined to become Diana's real daughter, as long as she agreed to take her along. The protagonist replied that she would be delighted to spend the day with her. Now Diana could deal with both Catherine and her mother at the same time, so they would fall into despair even faster. The carriage drove off, and Alice collapsed to the ground. The weather was lovely, Diana thought to herself. How long had it been since she'd gone out without bandages? The journey from the duchy to the capital usually took 3 days, but through the magic portal, it only took an hour. When Catherine said she was glad everything worked out, the protagonist glanced at her. The girl admitted she had been feeling guilty, so Diana had Catherine continue reading to her to ease her conscience. Hearing her daughter's sweet voice, like a canary, the Duchess's heart was filled with joy, as if living in a beautiful dream. Catherine agreed and said she enjoyed doing it too. Today's snack for the orphans was apple pie. If the boys were late, there wouldn't be any left at all. They decided to hurry. One of them bumped into a private room as they passed by. Catherine looked out the window and told her mother they had arrived. The fellow's mansion was magnificent and grand, leaving her in awe. It was no wonder Catherine was so impressed. Considering Ernest's constant financial struggles, this was entirely expected. The protagonist suggested they go inside. The ladies were stunned to see her grace the Duchess. The Duchess, they knew what had happened to her. Diana said that, fortunately, a true miracle had occurred today. Duchess Serena Aberg walked into the hall. She was glad to see that her Grace the Duchess looked healthy. Diana admitted that she was a little upset when she found out that it was her family doctor, not the Duchess, who had come. Diana said she was truly sorry, but that was why she had come in such a hurry as soon as she felt better. Diana had Catherine greet the Duchess. The girl lifted her skirt and excitedly introduced herself. Serena looked closely at the Duchess's daughter's face and said she was truly adorable. She led them to the room where the children were having refreshments. Serena suggested that Catherine join them too, and she of course agreed. But Diana unexpectedly said they shouldn't, and Catherine looked at her in confusion. Diana explained that her daughter had a cold, so she shouldn't get too close to the other children, lest she infect them. Catherine glared angrily at her mother, thinking, "What are you even saying?" Only then did she realize they were in front of other ladies. Diana silently pleaded with Catherine not to blame her. This was just a consequence of her own lie. Serena thought the Duchess's daughter could meet the other children next time. In the end, Catherine stayed with Diana throughout the tea party. On the way home, Diana asked the girl if she had fun. Catherine was sure that if the Duchess of Abergay weren't her future mother-in-law, she would have flipped the tea table. Diana looked out the window, wondering if the sunset had always been this beautiful. The carriage rumbled along a busy street. When Diana saw the blonde girl, she froze. The girl rushed into an alley, and the Duchess of Forresta immediately ordered the coachman to stop the carriage. Diana immediately flung open the carriage door, announcing that she had urgent business. She told the coachman to take Catherine home first and then come back for her immediately. The carriage drove off, and Diana stared at the alley where the blonde girl had disappeared. She immediately gave chase. Diana eventually arrived at the orphanage, which was still within the Duke's territory. She asked the passing children if they knew a blonde girl. The children immediately recognized who she was referring to, but didn't know her name. She then asked them if they knew where the girl was now. Diana froze when they pointed to another girl. By this time, Assel had finished washing the dishes and clearing the table. But while she was dealing with all of this, the other children kept making a mess. A hand reached out from somewhere and grabbed hers. Assel froze in surprise, seeing her mother right in front of her. Diana couldn't understand how she could have forgotten that feeling, the rage she felt when she held her dead daughter's body. She immediately pulled her into a hug. Diana, her voice trembling, asked the girl her name, and Assel introduced herself. Then the Duchess held her child tightly, repeatedly asking for forgiveness. She apologized to Assel for not recognizing her for so long. They decided to sit on a bench and talk. Diana gently stroked her biological daughter's hand. She asked the girl how she had discovered the truth and learned that she was her real mother. Assel wasn't sure if the Duchess would believe her story. It had all been so real that she couldn't tell if it was a dream or reality. Diana froze when Assel calmly said she had seen the future. Diana couldn't believe Assel had experienced the same hell she had. The girl knew it was hard to believe, but Diana held her hand and swore that whatever she said now, she would believe her. So Diana begged her to tell her every detail of the future. Assel had been thrown into the orphanage as soon as she was born, and the matron had seen her immediately. She had spent her whole life there. When she reached the age where she could leave the orphanage, she always worried about where she would sleep and what she would eat. That was when Alice had appeared. The woman told her that she would now be a servant in the Duke's mansion, working for the Duke's daughter, so she had better be grateful. At the time, Assel had been overjoyed, but the excitement hadn't lasted long. Catherine constantly yelled at her, cursed at her, and ordered her to do endless chores. Every time, she called the country bumpkin a good-for-nothing waste of space. More than once, Catherine had pulled Assel's hair, completely ignoring her screams to stop. She lived in a cramped little back room. Once, Assel had been so hungry that she grabbed a piece of moldy bread, only to find a worm crawling inside. The girl immediately threw it aside. She didn't know how much longer she would have to endure this terrible treatment. They treated her like some kind of animal. Assel didn't understand what she had done wrong. One day, she was cleaning her mistress's room when the family's private doctor suddenly knocked on the door and informed the young lady that she had arrived. Alice immediately ordered Assel to leave the room. The girl was in the hallway in an instant. For some reason, the young lady's conversation with the doctor caught her attention, and Assel decided to eavesdrop. The doctor told the lady that she had noticed. It turned out that the Duchess had discovered Alice's affair with the Duke. Assel froze, unable to believe that this woman was having an affair with the Duke. Poor Duchess. She had just gone blind. But Assel didn't understand why this woman would reveal the secret to the Duchess's daughter, Catherine. Now, Alice was planning to lock Diana away somewhere far away in the duchy, a place where no one would show up and she would never be found. Catherine suddenly turned to the family doctor like a mother, asking if everything would be all right. Alice spread her arms helplessly, reminding them that the Duchess was already blind. As long as they handed over the diamond mine the night before Catherine's social debut, this whole charade would be over, and then Alice could finally become the Duchess. On the day Diana died, they also needed to get rid of the girl, so Calypso wouldn't find out his real daughter was still alive. Assel collapsed to the ground. She was too weak to stand, completely bewildered by what all of this meant. The girl couldn't believe that she herself was the Duchess's real daughter. Now Assel understood everything. She finally knew why Alice had locked her away. This whole family was fake. The Duke had been hiding his affair right under his wife's nose. Assel swore she would never forgive them. She jumped to her feet, feeling a surge of power coursing through her. The girl stared blankly at the snowflakes that suddenly appeared out of thin air. Assel had no idea what this was. She couldn't believe she had magic. Assel didn't know why she had these powers, but she knew she had to save her mother. It was late at night, and Catherine was already asleep. A lock hung on the secret door of a cell. The girl wondered if it was just luck, but she had to get out today, no matter what. Assel decided to try again. She used her magic again. The Duke's daughter beamed when she realized it had worked. She unlocked the lock. She threw on a cloak, grabbed some bread, and slipped out. According to rumors, Alice planned to lock the Duchess in a cabin outside the duchy. Assel found the place. As soon as she opened the door, she saw her mother. The Duchess immediately asked who it was, but the girl froze, unable to utter a word. She was shocked by the conditions her mother was in. The girl handed her the bread and left the cabin without a word. Assel silently prayed in her heart for her mother to hold on a little longer, until she had gathered enough strength to save her. She ran, tears streaming down her face, begging her to wait a little longer. The girl had no idea that Alice had been following her. Several days passed, and Assel trained her magic every day. Now she was much more proficient than before. She was starving, but she could endure it all for her mother, as long as she could finally help. Assel returned to the cabin. The Duchess kept calling out for Catherine, her foolish charade breaking Assel's heart. She was her daughter, but Assel remained silent. With heavy steps, Assel walked back to the mansion, unsure when she would finally be able to tell the truth, and then they could escape together. But as she approached the gate, archers with bows and arrows blocked her path. Alice sneered triumphantly. Nice midnight stroll. Catherine complained to her father that the brat had completely disregarded the rule about not approaching the cabin. Calypso scratched his head, wondering if they even had such a young maid. Assel guessed that this man was her father. Since she had disobeyed his orders, the Duke had to punish her severely. House rules were unforgiving. Alice snapped that even killing her wouldn't be enough. But Assel just laughed at the woman's words. Catherine lunged at her, flailing her arms. The brat had no idea who she had messed with, but Assel wasn't going to let anyone hit her again. Magic froze the lady's arm solid. Alice and the Duke froze, and a deathly silence fell over the scene. Catherine screamed in pure agony. The Duke waved his hand and roared at the girl, "What are you doing?" Assel froze as a volley of arrows rained down on her. She could have used her magic, should have used it, but she didn't, for arrows pierced her instantly. The Duke comforted his daughter, completely unaware that he had just killed his own child. Assel didn't understand. Why hadn't he recognized her? Countless questions burned in her mind, but she could no longer. The girl's eyes snapped open, gasping for air, not immediately realizing what had just happened. She looked around and found herself in her own room. Assel didn't understand why she wasn't dead. She had clearly been shot with arrows. Just then, Catherine kicked the wardrobe and yelled at her maid, "Get out here." The Duchess ordered the broken glass to be cleaned up. As Assel worked, she couldn't believe it was real. She had somehow returned to the past. Now Assel had a chance. She wasn't going to live like she had before. She was determined to change her and her mother's lives. When she returned to the present, the girl thought the Duchess wouldn't believe her story, but Diana began to cry. She told her daughter that she had also returned to the past. Assel began to tremble. It was unbelievable. The protagonist realized this wasn't a coincidence. They had both returned to the past and remembered everything. Her daughter confessed that she wanted revenge. She hated Alice and Catherine with a passion. Because of everything they had done, their father was hated as well. Assel was determined to take revenge on every tormentor who had ruined her past life. Diana couldn't imagine how difficult and painful that had been for her. The protagonist knew it would be cruel to persuade her to give up revenge, so she nodded in agreement. The Duchess apologized to the coachman for making him wait. The coachman waved his hand dismissively, then winked, looking at the child standing next to the Duchess. He asked the Duchess, "Who is the child beside you?" Diana didn't answer. "Take us to the Parasite estate," she told the coachman. As soon as the carriage started rolling, Assel became excited. Diana asked her why, and the child smiled, saying, "This is the first time I've sat in such a soft and comfortable seat." Diana sighed. "First, you need to gain some weight." Assel guessed her maternal grandfather would probably dislike her appearance. At the orphanage, they said the Marquis came from a wealthy, aristocratic family. She felt like a mess compared to him. Diana shook her head. "Not really. He's a troublesome fellow, but you'll understand once you meet him." All the servants and staff were stunned when they saw their mistress return with a child. Marquis Parasite was quickly informed of his daughter's visit. Miss Diana walked straight into her father's office, ready to tell him everything and introduce his real granddaughter. The old man asked his daughter what brought her here so late. The moment Diana introduced the child, he frowned. The Marquis didn't understand what she was talking about at all. The protagonist calmly said she would explain everything soon. She felt that this matter would be hard for him to believe. After Diana laid everything out, the Marquis flew into a rage. "Calypso dared to betray me and switch the children." But the protagonist calmed him down. The Marquis didn't understand how she could be so calm, but Diana explained that she was simply waiting for the perfect opportunity to crush her enemies, so she asked for her father's help. The Marquis couldn't comprehend this. His daughter, whom he treasured more than his own life, had endured all of this alone. He didn't understand why she still wanted to return to that traitor's den. The The Marquis decided to ask his granddaughter how she had lived these past years. She told him she had been working as a maid in Catherine's room. Her father had Diana tell him the entire plan. He decided to help her. The protagonist gathered all the family members at a table because she had something to announce. Calypso was curious about what she wanted to say. Diana wanted to adopt a girl. The Duke and Alice were stunned by the protagonist's unexpected announcement. Catherine jumped up from her seat, reminding her mother that she already had her. But the protagonist explained that her father had written a letter saying he had found a relative of the Pashut family at the orphanage. Diana said she didn't know all the details, but the girl had no one to raise her. Catherine yelled that she didn't need any sisters. However, the protagonist calmly told the girl it was time to grow up. If there was someone to compare herself to, Catherine might change. A maid approached the Duchess and told her the girl had arrived. Assel walked into the dining room where all our protagonists were, and she immediately curtsied, observing proper etiquette. Catherine froze when she saw a familiar face, and then the protagonist's daughter said her name. Then, the story jumped back to 2 weeks prior. Although Miss Isel had inherited the Duchess's bloodline, the girl looked just like her mother. That same evening, Diana left her father's estate. Before leaving, she asked her father and Liz to take good care of Assel. As soon as morning arrived, Liz abruptly opened the curtains and told Her Highness it was time to wake up. Assel realized yesterday wasn't a dream. The maid felt something was amiss, but the girl quickly said everything was fine. She was just thinking. When a maid showed her a pile of beautiful clothes, the protagonist's daughter was thrilled. She couldn't believe they had prepared everything so quickly. She had just arrived last night. Liz chuckled softly and explained that there had been a flurry of activity last night. The Marquis had offered double the price to have the girls' dresses sewn as quickly as possible. The whole town was abuzz because of it. Now all these clothes belonged to Assel, but Liz felt they weren't elegant enough, which she regretted, but the girl thought they were wonderful. Assel needed a bath first, and Lisa told her that several maids would help her undress. The girl hesitantly said she could wash herself, but the maids told her to relax. Lisa felt sorry for the Duchess's daughter, who had grown up in an orphanage and had a hard life. After a maid had done the young lady's hair, she told her ladyship that she could now get into the bathtub. The water was just right. Assel noticed the maid pouring something into the water and asked if she could use it. It was a precious essential oil produced in the Duchy of Eberg, and Assel knew Catherine desperately wanted to buy it. But the Marquis had ordered that his granddaughter be provided with the best of everything while she was here, so Assel could relax and enjoy all the luxuries she had never had before, because now it all belonged to her. She was no longer an orphan from the orphanage, and definitely not a bookshelf maid anymore. The Duchess nodded, agreeing with Lisa. Marquis Parasot was in the dining room, eagerly awaiting the appearance of his granddaughter. Assel soon appeared, looking much better now, and thanked her grandfather for the beautiful dress he had prepared for her. He said it was no big deal, just some extra dresses kept at the palace. Assel smiled smugly. Lisa had already told her all the details. The servants began serving the dishes, and everything looked delicious. The Marquis told his granddaughter to eat as much as she wanted. But Assel had no idea how to eat these things properly. There were too many knives and forks, and she didn't know which set to use. She thought she would definitely be scolded if she messed up the etiquette or ate sloppily. The Marquis pushed a plate in front of her and said, "Don't be shy." He said, "Anything can be learned. There's no need to be upset about it." Assel picked up a fork, thanked his lordship, and wished him a pleasant meal. The Marquis suppressed a smile and said, "Call me grandfather. You're my only granddaughter now." Watching his granddaughter eat so heartily, it was as if he was tasting meat for the first time. The Marquis decided they needed to prepare more food next time. Assel suddenly froze, staring at the food. She told her grandfather she had a request. The Duchess's daughter asked him to cultivate her into a perfect lady as soon as possible, to help her mother. But the Marquis said Diana's revenge was enough. Assel insisted she had to protect her mother. The Marquis remembered his daughter telling him in that same tone and expression that she was waiting for the best time to strike back. Looking at her now, he realized his granddaughter was more than just a copy of her mother. The man nodded and said they would do as she asked. The story shifts to the present day, where the Duchess introduces Assel to her husband, Calypso. Assel then sat down next to Catherine. Alice pouted, refusing to believe any of this. A tense silence hung over the dining table. Calypso told his wife to be more cautious about this adoption and asked why she hadn't told him beforehand. The Duchess replied that her father had made her a proposition. Because Assel had magical talent, Diana wanted her to go to the magic festival with Catherine. It was a competition hosted by magic masters, open to all mages. Participants could freely demonstrate their skills in front of the masters, and they also had the opportunity to gain recognition from low-rank to high-rank mages. Whoever won in a fair duel would receive a grand prize from the Duchess's father, most likely control of the diamond mine. When Calypso heard this, he immediately froze and shouted, but that it was supposed to be Catherine's coming-of-age gift. The Duchess smiled and told him not to worry. Everyone could see that the real daughter would defeat the fake daughter. Catherine froze, but Assel just pursed her lips and smiled. Alice suddenly stood up and announced she was leaving. Something had just dealt her a heavy blow. Catherine followed her out, leaving Diana and her daughter alone with the Duke. The Duchess asked Assel if she liked the food, and the girl beamed, saying it was delicious. Diana handed the adoption papers to her husband and told him to finalize the procedures today. Calypso knew it would be difficult to argue with his wife. This involved the Marquis's diamond mine, and he had no choice. He took the papers. The Duchess suggested that if Assel had finished eating, she could show her around. The girl nodded and excused herself from the table. She told her father they would talk later. The man was stunned by her addressing him as such. Then the Duchess walked toward the hall. Since Assel had magical talent, she had the right to become a duchess. Diana noticed Assel clenching her fists tightly. She asked why, and Assel admitted she couldn't stand looking at the face of the man who had killed her. The Duchess understood perfectly. The Duchess offered to show her around later, but Assel immediately refused, saying she wanted to see Catherine's room now. Meanwhile, Alice's daughter, who was crying in her room, saw the Duchess and Assel. She snapped, "Why did you bring this brat here?" But Diana interrupted her. "Don't talk about your new sister like that." Alice's daughter sneered. "This brat is no sister of a noble lady." "Impossible." Diana repeated the doctor's words coldly. She asked Alice, "Wasn't this your first time meeting?" Even if they were friends, Alice had no right to cross the line and treat Assel like that. Diana demanded Alice apologize immediately. The family doctor had to formally apologize to the newly arrived Miss Ernest and give her the respect she deserved. Alice scoffed but complied. Assel accepted the apology, saying it was all right. Diana told her daughter, Assel, that some people are like that if they aren't raised properly. Diana knew that the family doctor came from the declining Viscount Blair family. Assel said she understood and only asked for more caution next time. As soon as the two girls were alone, Diana's biological daughter said to the fake one, Catherine, "Nothing's changed here." They hadn't seen each other in a long time, so Catherine asked, "How have you been?" Alice's daughter snapped, "How could someone like her be related to our family?" Catherine couldn't believe the child knew all this. Assel stepped closer and hissed, "You're the ones lying." Alice's daughter, Catherine, pleaded to use magic to perform the demonstration in her place, wanting to deceive her mother. Catherine pushed Assel away with all her might. At that moment, she was sure she could master that basic magic immediately. But if Assel revealed the secret about the abuse, Catherine wouldn't even be able to enter the Magic Academy. Alice's daughter, Catherine, snarled that they could just throw the nuisance out the window. So Assel changed tactics. As the girl walked toward the table, Catherine tensed. The hero's daughter grabbed the first cup she saw and smashed it on the floor. It shattered into countless pieces. Assel quickly bent down, murmuring that it had completely slipped from her grasp. But now someone had to deal with the mess. Alice's daughter, Catherine, had had enough and lunged at the hero's daughter, Assel. In a flash, she leaned back, ready to throw another punch at Assel. A scream ripped through the room, so loud that even the birds in the trees scattered like leaves. No doubt everyone in the mansion heard it. Diana rushed into the room, frantically asking what had happened. She saw Assel lying on the floor covered in blood, with Catherine crouched beside her. Diana rushed to the girl's side, asking how she felt, while Assel let out a weak moan. Catherine, in tears, stammered that she was completely innocent, but Diana roared at her, warning her that it was best not to lie now. Catherine tried to explain, but Assel suddenly blurted out that it was her own fault. The girl, Assel, just wanted to bond with Catherine and asked to share a room, but she flew into a rage. Assel messed up the timing, so she begged the Duchess not to punish her own daughter, Catherine. The truth was, the blonde girl, Assel, had set this up on purpose. The moment Catherine raised her hand, Assel cut her own wrist with a shard of glass. Catherine screamed as a sharp pain shot through her arm. The protagonist's daughter, Assel, sneered, telling Catherine she knew she would try to attack. The noble lady, Catherine, shrieked that she wouldn't let Assel get away with this, but Assel tugged hard on her bleeding hand. The daughter, Assel, grabbed Catherine's blood-soaked fingers and smeared them across her own face and dress, whispering, "Calm down." The fake daughter, Catherine, flinched in pain and snapped, "Don't touch me." Assel collapsed on the floor, sneering, "This family will soon see how cruel this young lady is." Soon, Catherine screamed, "She's faking it." Diana roared at the girl. "Catherine, enough," Diana said to the room. "Catherine's behavior has become intolerable. How can a noble lady lay her hands on someone? Assel will use this room. Consider this your punishment, Catherine." The Duchess ordered Shane and Milan to clear out Catherine's room today, refurnish it, and give it to Assel. Diana helped the girl, Assel, up and said, "It's best to get you to a doctor quickly." Alice tried to talk to Catherine, but the girl just ran out crying. Catherine, headed straight for the library. If Assel thought Catherine couldn't learn magic, she was sorely mistaken. She was going to devour every book on forbidden magic. Diana's magic was quite useful at a time like this. Catherine was determined to master these cheap magic tricks and make Assel regret her actions. When she returned to her room, she found they were moving out all her furniture. The new furniture was far more expensive and ornate than her previous set. Assel told her sister, Catherine, that their grandfather had carefully chosen it for her. She asked Catherine if she had ever seen anything so expensive before, then remembered Ernest was poor, but Alice snapped that she wasn't in the mood to talk to someone like her. The family doctor came in, and Alice asked if she could bandage Catherine's hand. Her daughter agreed and left the room. The wound healed well and looked much better within 2 weeks, but the scar would remain with Catherine forever. Alice asked her daughter if she had started it, and Catherine retorted, asking if her mother had no self-respect, bowing down to people. But Alice told her daughter to calm down. Catherine needed to learn to hide her emotions. She couldn't just jump headfirst into a fight like that. But Catherine didn't understand why even her mother thought it was her fault in this mess. She was the real victim. Alice promised she would find a way to get her into the magic aptitude test. The girl just nodded and walked towards the door. She had her own plans. Mother could work on becoming a real Grand Duchess herself. Then Catherine left, slamming the door behind her. They shouldn't have let Assel slip away in the first place. If she hadn't run away, there wouldn't be these damn problems now. An idea suddenly struck Alice. She grabbed a piece of paper and started scribbling a letter. She had heard of a place called the Black Market where any problem could be solved for a price. They were said to not only provide information, but also carry out assassinations. This was the only chance. Assel's room was stunningly decorated. The girl showed her mother the dresses and jewelry that Lisa and the maids had prepared especially for her. Assel wanted to write a letter to her grandfather to thank him. She hugged her mother, who smiled warmly, and said she was such a softie. The girl found that the lady lessons weren't so bad after all, but Diana felt a little guilty for not being able to protect her daughter from the beginning. But now she was sure she would never let her go again, vowing to protect and love her for the rest of her life. Milan walked into the room. Diana, a little nervous, asked Milan if something was wrong. Milan said the mage had just arrived. Assel knocked on her father's office door. Calypso immediately looked up from his papers, wondering why Assel had come to see him. He had heard that Catherine had been giving her a hard time, so he assumed the girl was just here to complain. As soon as Assel walked in, the Duke said he was busy, meaning she had to get to the point quickly. Assel asked her father if he wanted to see her new room. The Duke frowned and asked her why she didn't go to her mother. Assel said her mother was in class, and she still felt awkward around Catherine. In fact, Assel felt sorry that she only had time to greet her father last time. Assel asked if it would trouble him now, and Calypso said he could spare a minute. He asked the girl how she was doing in the manor, and she told him every day was filled with joy. She took walks on the trails every day. The more Calypso got to know Assel, the more he realized how different she was from Catherine. Elegance and nobility radiated from her every move. Unfortunately, Alice couldn't save Diana's child. If she were still alive, she would have looked exactly like this child. Assel asked her father if he was feeling all right. She could tell something was off. Calypso said everything was fine, so the girl pulled him inside. She showed off the furniture her grandfather had given her. Diana ran off at full speed, completely baffled as to why she'd been so forgetful lately. Rui saw Diana and grinned, waving at her. She was apologizing for being late when somehow her heel got caught. Diana was about to fall flat on her face, but Rui caught her effortlessly before she fell. He was glad he'd caught the Duchess. Otherwise, her cute little nose would have been ruined. Diana's face flushed crimson. Rui asked if she was hurt, seeing as she was so red. Diana apologized for being late. The man raised an eyebrow, asking seriously, "Was there something more important than me?" Diana explained that she had recently adopted a daughter, a child who now looked exactly like her. She was seriously considering taking magic lessons herself. If the girl looked anything like the Duchess, she must be adorable, and the man? He insisted on meeting her formally later. Valinda was practicing on the training grounds. By now, His Highness's magic lesson must be over. It was time to go back. Rui snorted, "Who are you planning to stab with your ice needles?" But Valinda glared at him. "Are you done?" The man grinned smugly. "Next time." Just then, Valinda jogged over. "Your Highness, is your lesson over?" A look of surprise spread across Rui's face. He clearly recognized the maid. The protagonist stepped closer and asked, "Do you know each other?" Valinda told them she came from an orphanage in Marcus District 8, where the orphanages sometimes held social gatherings. Ruri was a friend she met there. Ruri lived in an orphanage called Angeline. Hearing this, Diana found it strange. She had been volunteering at orphanages for a while, and Angeline was one of them, but she had never seen a child named Ruri there. Diana couldn't understand why, but suddenly she felt a sharp headache and groaned in pain. Rowena and Valinda immediately panicked. Diana apologized for her headache returning, and the maid quickly offered her shoulder for the Duchess to lean on. Valinda decided to take Diana back to the mansion. Ruri could only watch her leave. When Calypso was young, his mother brought him clothes to wear to a royal reception. The woman asked him if he liked them. The boy couldn't believe that this was all he could wear. His mother apologized, saying she had wanted to buy him something better. Calypso couldn't understand how a member of a ducal family could wear such cheap clothes. His grandfather was the emperor's illegitimate child. Poverty had been passed down through generations in his family, and their luck had only worsened. Even after becoming a duke, Calypso couldn't pay off his debts. Starving like a beggar despite being a nobleman was hell. At a gathering, he overheard that the saintess from Forresta planned to open another orphanage. When Calypso finally saw the rumored Diana with his own eyes, his mind was made up. He could use this girl to climb the social ladder. Pretending to be Diana's true love was easy. With the dowry from Marquis Forresta, he not only resolved his financial crisis, but even started new business. But the good times didn't last. The Marquis interfered in everything, and pretending to love Diana became a living hell. She was born different, unlike the mediocre Calypso. Isol told her father that her room was very different now. It used to be so gloomy. The man turned to the girl, saying he had to keep it short. Diana's daughter decided to show her father the jewels. The girl asked, "Aren't these pretty? I've never received anything like this before." Calypso froze, asking, "What do you mean?" Not long ago, after her mother told her everything about her father, the girl couldn't believe it was true. The man had only used Diana for her money. Diana agreed with her daughter. If Calypso saw the gifts from her grandfather, his fragile ego would surely shatter. Isol planned to set a trap to manipulate the Duke later and asked her mother for help. Calypso said, "The Marquis' family has much better things than these." The girl started crying, saying, "This is all so new to me. I've always been poor. Living in poverty despite being a noble's daughter was terrible." Calypso knelt down on one knee and wiped Isol's tears, but she kept saying, "I'm okay. I'm okay." Her maternal grandparents had finally accepted her, which was why the Marquis had given her all these gifts. The Duke was completely unaware of how she had lived. Isol wanted to spend every day with her father, but was afraid to ask for too much. Calypso agreed. The girl immediately beamed, and a gentle smile touched Calypso's lips. Diana received a package. Valinda said it was from the Marquis, and Diana thanked the girl. She opened the box, and a small blue orb flew out. Suddenly, her father's voice came from it. Diana's eyes widened as a screen suddenly appeared before her, displaying her father's pensive face. It was a magical device for long-distance communication. The Marquis had spent a fortune on it, but it was much more convenient than regular letters, which were monitored and read. The Marquis told his daughter that everything was ready. Then he showed her a plant called laurel bind. It combined laurel leaves and binder grass, revived with magic. After the conversation, Diana went straight to her husband. Alice hadn't been seen much lately, probably because Isol and the new servants were keeping a close watch. Diana found their finances weren't good, but not terrible either. Calypso frowned and asked if she had run out of money, wondering why she would ask such a thing. But Diana replied that she actually had some interesting information. It turned out her father was preparing a new business venture. The Marquis had developed a painkiller that was miraculously effective for various ailments. It was Laurelbind. Calypso had shown no business acumen since their marriage. He was financially strapped, barely breaking even in everything he did these days. The man asked his wife how they could get their hands on this plant. This was the bait Diana had used to lure him in. She stood up and told her husband not to worry. She would always have his back. Diana had promised the Duke she would bring him some cuttings of the plant, and Calypso had hugged her tightly and thanked her. Diana had asked her father about the plant and learned that if improperly handled, it could become a deadly poison. Thus, the plant fit perfectly into her plan. She hugged her husband back, smiling and telling him that words couldn't express how much she loved him. If Calypso could deceive her, he could deceive others too, and soon he would be the greatest deceiver of them all. The next day, Diana noticed that she was running low on some of her regularly used alchemy ingredients. She had been busy lately, so she hadn't paid much attention. I should stock up on more ingredients. Diana called for Milan and Shane, instructing them to prepare everything for a trip. She wanted to visit the market district and do some shopping. Milan's eyes lit up immediately. She finally had the perfect opportunity to dress the Duchess beautifully. Diana decided to treat them to some delicious desserts. Soon after, the Duchess and her entourage arrived in town. She stopped in front of a shop and smiled when she spotted a rare purification crystal. The ones she usually ordered were much smaller than this. Since she needed a large quantity of crystals for her potions, Diana decided to stock up. She thought she might as well look for some fire crystals as well. They were placed high up, so she had to stretch her arm to reach them. Just then, someone taller than her appeared out of nowhere and snatched it. Before she could react, a familiar male voice reminded her Grace to be careful. After Diana thanked him, the man pulled back the hood of his cloak. When Diana saw Ruri, she blinked, flustered, and asked him what he was doing there. He simply replied that it was only natural for a mage to be in a magic shop. Ruri told her not to mind his attire, explaining that he had run out of materials mid-experiment. He asked Diana what else she needed. Diana still needed mermaid's tears, sunset sand, and scale powder. Mermaid-related materials are on the second floor, Ruri said. He reminded the Duchess to watch her step on the stairs. When Diana realized Ruri was planning to follow her, she raised an eyebrow. The mage explained that he would have to assist her if she couldn't reach something again. Ruri extended his hand, and Diana took it. Diana was glad she had come here herself. It was her first time in a magic shop. She usually ordered all her materials by mail. Diana noticed there was only one bottle of mermaid's tears left on the shelf. She reached for it, just as another customer approached. Diana gave him a nervous smile. "If you're not in a hurry, perhaps you could let me have it." But the nobleman sneered. "I got to this box first." Diana tried to explain, "I really need these." But the man barked and shoved her aside with force. He glared. "I got them first, so they're mine now." Diana realized she was losing her balance and about to fall.